Hogwarts, rising as Harry's twin with power. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 276. Darren, you go fast. Of course, none of this had anything to do with him. He took out the snacks of his teeth, fed them all, and prepared to leave. But Harry and Ron still had their teeth drawn. They felt that their teeth were at least a fighting force. They can't rely on Darren alone, right? Darren sighed. He seemed to be very worried about his teeth. But Harry and Ron immediately diverted his gaze. Darren, take a look. There are several spiders here. They really rushed to the forbidden forest. Let's go. Harry's voice fell, and they saw that Darren had followed with a burning look. Obviously, he couldn't wait any longer, and even forgot that they still had teeth. Darren is indeed interested in the eight-eyed giant spider Aragog in the original book. This guy is truly a faceless icon. Adopted by Hagrid, he was not completely loyal to Hagrid. And even when Hagrid was expelled, it did not say that it was the Basilisk who attacked the girl. Even when Harry and Ron wanted to come over and find out what's going on, he even wanted to eat Harry and Ron, but it didn't fall well. In the 6th grade, Harry took out his venom. Darren was really a little curious about the spider now, but after he saw these spiders, he was disappointed. Spiders are indeed ugly, and so many dense spiders, so that his dense phobia is guilty of him even subconsciously want to clean up these spiders. But for the sake of the image, he still resisted. Vomit, it's disgusting. We really can't leave? Why do you have to follow these spiders to find out why? And why doesn't Hagrid tell the Ministry of Magic directly? Ron grumbled at Harry and Darren sighed. Maybe there's no time, right? Harry said hesitantly. However, he also disgusted and dodged a small spider. Hagrid must have no choice. Otherwise, Ron, you and your brother first. Go to rest. I see your face is really not good for me to go in by myself, right? Darren, who had accepted the father's value, was a little pale. Apparently he was terribly scared too, but he decided to let Ron and his brother stand outside and go in on his own adventure. Get out? No one is allowed to go out. What are you doing? Just as Harry and Ron were about to refuse, they heard a dull voice. We're Hagrid's friends, and we want to know what really happened 50 years ago. Did you know that there is a snake inside the castle? Where does it usually stay? Before Harry and Ron could speak, Darren asked with an anxious expression. He actually regretted it. He just wanted to hurry back. What a bunch of stuff. Why didn't the Basilisk eat all these spiders? Of course, although he thought so, on the surface, he still showed a worried look. It seems that there is no idea of the malice of these spiders towards them. Hagrid's friend? How did Hagrid himself not come? Aragog came to be interested. Hagrid has always been here. As for people, they eat as long as they can. Hagrid was captured by the Ministry of Magic 50 years ago. So, captured? That is, you have come here, and no one knows? Aragog interrupted Darren. Darren opened his mouth. He seemed to realize something. He looked left and right. Sure enough, they were already surrounded by spiders. What are you going to do? Darren vigilantly pulled out his wand, and he almost subconsciously blocked Harry and Ron behind him. Brother, if there's really a problem, you and Ron will run away, and here I'll deal with it. Don't worry, I'm strong. How can you possibly face so many spiders? Yeah, these spiders can't let us out either. Harry and Ron also cautiously took out their wands, but they did feel very annoyed. Is that where Hagrid let them come? Was Hagrid planning for them to come over and feed the spiders? Are you planning to leave? As if seeing Darren's vigilance, Aragog asked alertly, but it immediately laughed again. You can't go anymore. It's already surrounded by my children and grandchildren outside. If you were asking something else, I might be able to look at Hagrid's face and let you go. But you're asking this question, and I didn't even tell Hagrid. That's the creature we eight-eyed spiders fear the most, and I absolutely can't say its name. I can only trouble you to die. Hagrid must not understand how his children disappeared into the Forbidden Forest. Maybe I can tell him that you were killed by the centaurs, who hate explanations anyway and only look at the stars. Aragog said in 2 words even how to lay their death on the centaurs if they were dead. Then it took a step back. Say to its descendants, children, enjoy your feast. Countless spiders pounced. Sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary mission. After the spiders have captured Harry and Ron, use the fire spell to burn most of the spiders. Note, while using the fire charm, use the Holy Father value to control the fire spell within control. After the mission is completed, get the favor of the centaurs. Will the host accept the task? Access. How can such a cool task not be picked up? Darren was pleased, but the expression on his face remained vigilant. He escorted Harry and Ron out and rushed out. He kept using ordinary spells to beat away the spiders that were close to them, but because he was kind, the spiders he opened were all right, so they rushed up again and again. Darren could only watch as Harry and Ron were tied up in spider silk. Let them go, Darren shouted in panic. He tried to go to the rescue, but the dense spiders blocked his way. I can let you go, as long as you leave them behind. Aragog was struck by Darren's power. It said compromisedly. It seems that this is a sign of respect for Darren. Darren, go fast, leave us alone. You go out and find the professor now, and we'll be alive. Harry and Ron cried out in pain. Episode 277. Damn stupid dog. Even Harry and Ron's already frightened whole body trembled, but they didn't want to let Darren help anymore. Darren has helped them a lot. He had been protecting them. For so long, they had heard Darren's panting voice. Darren looked at them and shook his head. I'm leaving now. You're going to die. How can you wait for the professor? I'm not an idiot, Darren cried out angrily. Harry and Ron then discover that Darren is angry. He just never lost his temper with them. But they'd rather let Darren go now. Why couldn't he be a little more stupid? You let my brother go. I beg you, we will never say this when we go back. Please let my brother and Ron go, Darren said with a pale face. He looked at the wand in his hand with a sad expression. I always think that no matter what kind of life, as long as you know that mistakes can be corrected, you can get along without incident. So, as long as you let your brother and Ron go, I won't pursue everything. I beg you, Darren pleaded. The expression on his face was desperate. It seems to have been suppressed to the deepest extent, as if it can explode at any time. Aragog did not find his repression. It had been observing this student from the side for a long time. I found that he did not dare to kill at all, even if he was very powerful. But he didn't dare kill them. It was all useless. It laughed dismissively. Impossible, they didn't show there, Aragog said without concern. But before he could finish speaking, a soaring flame had already appeared in front of him. In the blink of an eye, almost all of its descendants were reduced to ashes. Of course, Darren also used 100 father values to control the scope of the fire curse. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the task and gaining the favor of the centaurs. Centaur favor. Centaurs think you are a child of destiny, and they will curry favor with you in moderation, is it? Thinking about the attitude of the centaurs to Harry Potter, Darren felt that this favor should be of little use, but in the end, it is still a reward. He happily accepted it. Ding! Sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task, make a trance, look at the wand in front of you with a terrifying look, and when Professor McGonagall asks, say, Professor, I used the unforgivable spell, am I a bad person? Ding! After the mission is completed, get the bonus fire spell improved edition. Will the host receive the task? Access. Darren immediately chose to pick it up. Then a trance expression appeared on his face. He stood in the middle of the flames, as if he had forgotten that the place was about to be burned clean by the flames. He had no intention of sheltering himself, as if he were waiting for the flames to engulf him. But he also noticed that a barrier had been propped up around him. Obviously, neither Dumbledore nor Snape could have let him actually be burned to death. Even if they didn't care, he wouldn't be fine. He stood in a daze. For the sake of the truth, he began to recall the plot. In the original book, when Harry and Ron were caught, it was Mr. Weasley's car that came over. I don't know if this time it will be the same. Anyway, he just needs to honestly pretend to be in a trance here again. After all, a second grader used a fire spell, which is really incredible. Evil heart, determined to kill. Even if he was trying to save Harry, he still had to pretend. So he looked even more confused. Darren, Ron called out to Darren loudly. Darren. Quick, let's pull him out as soon as possible. Harry shouted as well, but he reacted immediately and prepared to go straight over. I know that this magic is a powerful fire spell that requires extremely strong malice to release, and Darren must be frightened, and it is useless to call him now. Harry pulled out his wand. He tried to use the water like a spring with his wand, trying to make a passage with the little water above his wand. He saw that the place was already on fire, as if it were going to burn everything up. But magically, Darren's surroundings were not burned. Darren's surroundings seemed to hold up a barrier, holding him firmly in the middle. That's why Harry wasn't too anxious. Thundered. Just when Harry and Ron thought it would be better to go to the professor and let the professor inside the castle come over, a behemoth rushed to them. It was Mr. Weasley's car. It stopped in front of Harry and Ron. Harry and Ron jumped into the car, and then they threw their teeth into the trunk. Quick, rush in, Darren is still inside, let's pull him out. Ha tapped the car with his wand, he said anxiously. The car rumbled and started, and then they rushed into the flames. Darren, Harry opened the car door and pulled Darren in. He had thought he would hit the barrier, but not at all. After Darren was ripped away by them, the place was covered by the flames. The car rumbled away. Harry though they were relieved, but they all looked at Darren worriedly. Darren was in such bad shape that he looked down at his own wand as if he were stupid. Even if they brought him out with such a big movement, they were not awakened. Go back first. Harry was about to say something about going back when he suddenly noticed that the car was shaking. And then he and Ron and Darren were all thrown out. They have come out of the Forbidden Forest. Darren, are you okay? As soon as he landed, Harry asked. But Darren just shook his head bitterly, and he looked at his wand as if he were looking at something terrible. But Harry was relieved. Although Darren still looks bad, the good guy has a little reaction. Well, let's go. I just heard the voices of the professors. They must have been attracted by the fire, Ron said worriedly. He dragged Harry and Darren away, but the cry of the teeth sounded. The teeth barked loudly. Then, a figure had appeared around them. It's Snape. Then there was Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout. Almost the whole castle professors came, but some stood by them, others rushed into the Forbidden Forest. Obviously they were going to suppress the fire curse. Shit. I knew I would have listened to Darren and thrown this stupid dog inside Hagrid's hut for 9. Episode 278. He must be broken. My dear Mr. Weasley, where are you going? Maybe I can tell you poor potions professor so that he can know where to find your corpse. Snape's mocking voice rang out. Harry and Ron took a deep breath at the same time. They know that this time it will be absolutely unlucky. Even, there's Darren. He used a fierce fire spell. Harry had heard Hermione say that it seemed that the Ministry of Magic would not allow him to use it. Would he be expelled? We want to come over and find Hagrid. Ron stammered. He pushed Harry, trying to get Harry to join him. Harry nodded hurriedly, his eyes wide open as he tried to convince Snape of him. Yes, Professor, we came to find Hagrid, he is ours. Friend, we heard that he was captured by the Ministry of Magic, that's why he will. Harry was lying. Although he saw the look in Snape's eyes, he thought he might already know everything. However, he also felt that it was an idea that had come out of his heart. How can there be someone who can see through other people's thoughts? Only before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Darren. He said in a bit of a trance, Professor, I used the fire charm, am I an asshole? Am I going to Azkaban? Ding. Congratulations to the host for completing the mission and getting the improved version of the fire curse. Fire spell improved version, modified fire charm so that it does not require malicious intent to use, and can also be used by extreme love and protection. Note, integrating love and guardianship into the fire spell makes the fire spell even more fanatical. This fire spell will not expand massively, turning it into a controllable magic. You used the fire charm? Oh my god, boy, how could you possibly use it out? Professor McGonagall covered her mouth in disbelief. She couldn't seem to understand what Darren was saying. How could this child possibly use such a spell? Her words made Darren's face paler even more. He almost subconsciously lowered his head, and his eyes were red as he grasped the wand. Professor, Darren is here to save us, and those spiders are going to eat us. Yes, Professor, I can testify that those spiders are the 8-eyed giant spiders. They are crazy, saying that if we come to ask about the Chamber of Secrets, we want its life. It let its descendants entangle us all and prepare to digest them directly. Harry and Ron explained anxiously. Professor McGonagall still frowned. She wasn't angry that Darren had used the fire charm, she was just worried that using the fire spell would affect the child's heart. Those unforgivable spells, the auras of the Ministry of Magic, are not generally allowed to be used. It was only on those darkest days that the Ministry of Magic set a precedent for the use of unforgivable spells on the auras. Darren, do you think you're okay? Professor McGonagall asked worriedly, and Darren shook his head. He looked up bitterly and said softly, Professor, I feel good. There is not a single point of discomfort. However, this is what frightened me, and I did not feel the slightest discomfort after using this magic. Darren whispered, and he threw away his wand. Apparently, he felt that he was no longer worthy of using his wand. Where are you going to send me to Azkaban? I suspect I'm an evil person. I did this kind of thing, and there was not a trace of discomfort. I may be, the book said, born bad. Darren's words made everyone present cry and laugh. What is a born bad seed? How could Darren be that kind of person? He didn't even want to kill the most heinous people. How could he be a demon? However, what Darren said did make all the professors wary. How is it possible to use such a spell without feeling of discomfort? Is there something wrong with Darren's body? Or did that spell affect Dalen or something? Professor McGonagall frowned and picked up Darren's wand. Darren, I'll try it with the flashback pre-spell. She spoke, and then a golden incantation appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Then the crowd was a little confused. Is this a fire curse? When did the fire spell change to this warm color? This is the fire curse, but it is different from the ordinary fire curse. Professor Flitwick looked at Darren's fiery spell in confusion. He was confused. How could Darren have used such a strange fire spell? Darren's face was depressed, but he wanted to smile. Why, of course, he let the system forge it. How else could it have become like this? Of course, he was still standing in the same place, with a look of pain. Listening to the professor's arguments, he looked even more heartbroken. Obviously feel guilty of the most. Harry and Ron were beside him worrying to comfort him. They really don't think these professors need to be on the line like this. Darren was clearly trying to save them, and even if this spell was illegal, was it more important than life? Unfortunately, not only the professor thought so, but even Darren himself thought so. I should be damned. How can someone like me still be alive? I can use such a spell, my heart must be very bad, he said in pain, and his eyes gradually turned red. He also refused Harry's approach, fearing he would hurt them. Oh, Darren, don't do this. Many Aurors use such spells and have no reaction. This only shows that the heart is strong, and it does not mean that you are a bad person, and you're not breaking the law. Professor Flitwick only reacted, and he looked at Darren's worried explanation. But Darren couldn't hear it, and he was so red in his thoughts that he was crazy. Darren, be sober, or I'll give you a potion, Snape said worriedly. He picked up his wand and tapped it lightly on Darren's body, and his face became more dignified as he watched the light from the wand's reaction. I'll send him to the school infirmary first, and you will study. Potter Cubs, just don't stop. Episode 279, Fire Spell Improved Edition. As Snape and Darren left, several professors who had gone to the Forbidden Forest had returned with ease. They had smiles on their faces, obviously nothing had happened. At best, it burned many 8-eyed giant spiders. But these guys had a bad reputation, and they burned to death. The only thing in this school who would be upset about the disappearance of the 8-eyed giant spider was Hagrid. What about Darren? Professor Lawrence asked doubtfully. Then, he saw Professor McGonagall studying them with Darren's wand, and with a helpless smile on his face, he said, "Don't you study? Don't you really understand? This is a modified version of the fire curse. You should know that many mantras actually affect the mind in the first place, but when they use another emotion to exert it, it becomes very controllable. Just like if you use the Patronus charm with a dark mind, it will become a dark attack charm. Darren's fire spell, you know, is used with love and protective emotions, so his fire spell is this color. Moreover, the fire of the Forbidden Forest is also very controllable, and we have finished it in just a few moments. And even if we don't come, the fire will extinguish itself after burning the eight-eyed giant spider. Lawrence looked at Professor McGonagall with some surprise, and seemed to be very puzzled. Such a simple thing. Why did they not study it for half a day? Ah, I already knew. I just forgot to say it. Professor Flitwick triumphantly let go of Darren's wand. Professor Sprout shook his head in embarrassment, as if he wanted to say something, and finally pretended not to hear anything, bowed his head and said nothing. Only Professor McGonagall opened her mouth, and she did not return to God for half a day. Then she smiled. I knew it was so. Darren always thought too much. How could he be a bad boy? I had just seen this fire spell and wanted to say it, but Harry and Ron always interrupted me. Right, look at you two children. Always interrupting us. Yeah, you can't be so anxious next time. How bad? The three professors immediately smiled and said. It was as if they hadn't been studying Darren's wand together. Harry looked blankly at Professor McGonagall. Other professors counted. Why is Professor McGonagall so skilled in doing this kind of thing? Well, kids, give the wand back to Darren and tell him the good news by the way. The boy must be terrified. Professor McGonagall returned the wand to Harry. She still had a relieved smile on her face. Even forgot to punish them. Harry had wanted to mention it, but Ron elbowed him in the chest. You're stupid. Waiting for points to be deducted or closed, Darren was led by Snape to the school doctor's office. His steps were slow. It looks like it's full of heart. Hurry up, Potter. Do you want to wait until tomorrow to come back to the school doctor's office? Snape said sarcastically, but a trace of concern flashed in his eyes. Darren sighed. He really didn't want to go to the school doctor's office. Every time I went to the school infirmary, I was forced to pour potions. But, for the sake of people, he still quickened his pace. Standing in the school doctor's office, Darren did indeed face Madame Pomfrey's somewhat helpless expression. Fortunately, he is now pretending to be decadent. In order not to listen to Madame Pomfrey's nagging, he asked in a desperate voice, Professor, Madam, am I really a bad person? Why can I use this spell? Should I take the initiative to go to Azkaban? He said bitterly. The eyes were quietly reddened again. Both Madame Pomfrey and Snape had worried expressions, but they couldn't say anything. Because most of the people they hear are people who can use this spell, not good people. At the very least, they have the potential to become dark wizards. Well, these are not your concerns. Whether you are a dark wizard or not has nothing to do with whether you can use these spells. Drink it, Snape said sarcastically, but his eyes were suppressed with worry. How could this child use black magic? Was it because part of the Dark Lord was in his body? Did the Dark Lord influence him so deeply? And how should he tell this child so that he can understand that he is not a bad person? Darren took Snape's potion and drank it all. He was pushed to his hospital bed by Madame Pomfrey. Oh, kid, get a good night's sleep, and when you wake up, you're all right. No one is going to tell anyone about your use of this magic. And don't worry about Madame Pomfrey softly comforting. But how could Darren, as the little father, agree with that? He had a wry smile on his face. The corners of the eyes are slightly reddened. He was just about to say something when a sudden wave of sleepiness struck. He tried to resist the urge to yawn, and said bitterly, Madam, don't comfort me. I must be hopelessly bad, otherwise you would have told me the reason long ago. I made you too embarrassed. He said this, already sleepy and unable to open his eyes. When he heard the reminder of the Holy Father's value, he simply and neatly fell asleep. Only a sleepy tear slipped from the corner of his eye. Darren, you're not a bad person. Harry and Ron rushed in from outside. This is the scene we are facing. Seeing Darren shed tears even in his sleep, their hearts began to sour. Darren always did. This magic was clearly used to save them. Instead, he thought that he was an asshole using this magic. We are here to tell Darren that the professor said that he was using love and guardianship to unleash this emotion with spells. He's not a badass, but, it seems, we're one step too late. Well, it wouldn't have been illegal to use the fire spell in the Ministry of Magic. It is only illegal to use the 3 unforgivable spells. I don't know where you saw it, but to use the fire spell would require you to be imprisoned in Azkaban, the reckless lion of the Potter family. Although Snape had a hint of relief in his eyes, he still showed a disdainful expression. Stupid little cubs. Episode 280, Jinny's Prayer. The next day, the whole castle was discussing the fire in the Forbidden Forest last night. Darren sat in the Gryffindor lounge. He had an embarrassed smile on his face. That's the way it is. I thought I had gone bad, he said obediently. Harry and Ron next to them were relieved. They had just told Darren about the professor's inferences from yesterday. Darren, you don't even know that Professor McGonagall's face turned green when he heard Professor Lawrence's words. But in order not to be embarrassed, she still put the responsibility on us. Forehead. Professor McGonagall still has such a side? Darren was curious. However, as a little holy father, he said guiltily, the professor should have been frightened by my performance, otherwise they must have remembered it a long time ago, and I delayed the professor's thinking. Darren, you've always been so kind, but I think they really forgot. Well, that's the reason you said, Ron said helplessly. This time, however, Harry did not agree with him, because Professor McGonagall came in. She brought bad news. Final. The animals that the school attacked the students were still not found, and we need all the students to leave in order to conduct a large-scale search of the school. She pursed her lips and said these words, and she also glanced at Harry and Ron, because she thought about Harry and Ron running to the Forbidden Forest. But when she saw Darren, she smiled. Oh, Darren, how come you're here too? I'm really glad to see you smiling. it's just that we still haven't found that monster. Professor McGonagall shook her head sadly. They decided to have all the students of Hogwarts take their final exams after a week and then close the doors. However, she did not know when she would start learning again. Because you have to wait until after you find the monster. Professor, if the school is closed, I can also help, you know. I will be a modified version of the fire curse. I can also small. Darren accepted the father's value, and the expression on his face became more sincere. Professor McGonagall shook his head. Then again, you'll still have to prepare for the exam first, though I think, Darren, you're definitely the first in your grade. You are the proudest of the students I have brought with me over the years. Professor McGonagall's words made Darren's face turn red. He lowered his head in embarrassment and looked very well behaved. Professor McGonagall then set her sights on the rest of Gryffindor. This time she had a big smile on her face. In addition to these, there is also good news that the mandrake is about to ripen. In 2 days, we will be able to wake up those children. Maybe one of them can provide some clues. Even if we can't find the snake, we can find the person who opened the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets. Professor McGonagall's words cheered the whole of Gryffindor. Darren showed a surprised expression. Apparently, the news made him very happy. Still, he pretended to sneak a peek at Jinny. Jinny's face was pale. Although Darren felt that even if Hermione woke up, it would be impossible to know that Jinny had done it. But Jinny clearly thought they might know. She squeezed out a strong smile, and Percy next to her frowned and touched the door of her head, obviously suspecting that she was cold. Jinny didn't take Percy. Suddenly, as if she had made up her mind, she quietly walked over to Darren's side. Darren, can you come out with me in a moment? Jinny said with a pale face. Darren nodded hurriedly, but he still showed a worried expression. Jinny, your face is really bad. Why don't I take you to the school doctor's office first? No. I'm okay, I'm just. Well, I'll go to the school doctor's office first, and then I'll come to you, and you must come over, she said anxiously. Darren nodded again, then sympathetically looked at the back of her departure. Child, if you don't say it now, you'll be taken away by Tom in a moment. But Jinny clearly felt that the lounge was not the place to talk. She was somewhat afraid of being expelled by the professor, so just want to tell Darren. But none of this, Darren should have known. So he just showed a little puzzled and worried expression. Then I thought that I could talk to Jinny for a while, and I gradually let go of my worries. In order to complete his agreement with Jinny, Darren waited outside the lounge after Professor McGonagall left. While he was waiting, Percy awkwardly walked over. He looked at Darren and stopped talking, and finally asked, Darren, is Jinny going to tell you something? Yeah, but I've been waiting here for so long and I still haven't seen Jinny coming. Have you seen it? Darren showed a worried expression. Percy looked much more relaxed, and he hurriedly said, I stopped her from coming. I heard her want to say something to you before. I really don't want her to say. Darren looked at him helplessly. He had thought that Jinny had been taken away by Tom and was about to go to the professor to talk about it, but was stopped by Percy. This is really a good brother in China, but the way I looked at Jinny before seemed like something very important. Percy, are you really sure she's going to say something about you and not something else? Don't worry, Darren, it's my business. Well, it's actually Penelope's business. Jinny couldn't get used to Penelope's approach and she always wanted to tell you, but I stopped her. I'm sorry, Penelope has been crying all this time. She is worried that you have been wronged, and she is also worried that she will be punished by the professors. Percy tangled and scratched her hair. Finally he said, when you and Hermione were petrified before. Penelope was actually at the other end of the hallway, and she was so frightened that she turned and ran. Then she wants to testify to you that you're not petrified, Hermione, but her previous act of running away had gone too far, and she was afraid of being scolded by Professor Flitwick. After all, she was the prefect of Ravenclaw. So, episode 281, Attack Again, Penelope? Darren remembered. It is the girl in the original book who was petrified with Hermione. This time apparently because of his presence, the girl ran away. Well, Hermione was miserable, and the girl saw everything. Luckily, he didn't talk to the Basilisk, otherwise he would have definitely been seen. At that time, he is behind the scenes, and he will have to be discovered. Although, he wasn't theoretically. Of course, these are all other words. He looked at Percy with a gentle smile in his eyes, and even a little helplessness. It's okay, whoever encounters this kind of thing will be afraid. You don't look at me and pounce on it, actually just because I know I'm strong. And when I pounced on it, I was very scared, and at that time I didn't even dare to look up, and I couldn't even kill it in the end. You tell Sister Penelope that I don't blame her, that it's not her fault, and that she doesn't need to say sorry to me. Penelope is afraid, and are you afraid too? Are you still the prefect? You actually hid Darren for others? Let others misunderstand Darren. Ron angrily rushed to Percy's side. He pointed to Percy's nose. Seems to be very angry. Percy was a little embarrassed, and he hurried away. Ron then turned to Darren. I'm sorry, Darren. Well, I don't think there's any need to apologize for this kind of thing. And maybe we should need to apologize to Percy. Because Sister Penelope was obviously his friend, he hid it from his friend and came over to tell me about it, indicating that he was really kind. Ron, you shouldn't have said that about him. Ron opened his mouth, as if scolding Percy or something, but when Darren looked over, he pretended to understand and said, okay, I'll apologize to him. If he had beaten Percy, he might have apologized to Percy and even said it this time. It's just that he didn't say it. After all, no one could refute his proposal in front of Darren. Looking into his turquoise eyes, no one wanted them to be stained with mist. Well, this matter will be perfectly solved, and and next, I will go to find Jinny, Darren said seriously. Concern appeared in his eyes. Looking for Jinny? Didn't Percy say he stopped Jinny? Yeah, Jinny is a little girl and always notices these things. Maybe she was threatened by Percy. Oh, Darren, don't worry, they're brother and sister, and nothing will happen. Harry quickly changed his mouth. Only he found that Darren's brow was still not undone. No, I'm going to find Jinny, and I don't think that's what Jinny wants to tell me. Maybe I'm thinking too much, but Darren immediately went outside. I remember Jinny saying she would go to Madame Pomfrey first and then come to me. Let's ask Madame Pomfrey first, even if it's a false alarm. It's better than waiting for her to have an accident. Harry and Ron felt that Darren was worried too much, but now that they were okay, they could still go and see it. But when they got to Madame Pomfrey, they realized that Jinny hadn't come at all. They finally realized that something might not be right. At this point, Jinny is likely to have anything to do. They decided to go to the professor. It was only when they pushed open the faculty lounge that they found that there was no one at all. Then, just as they were about to leave, they heard Professor McGonagall's voice resounding throughout the school. All students will go back to their respective common rooms immediately, and there will be a person in charge to tell you everything. Please return to the common room as soon as possible. Teachers come to the lounge for a meeting as soon as possible. Her voice was so serious that it was obvious that something important had happened again this time. Harry and Darren and Ron stood in the faculty lounge, pale in the face. Harry was about to say something, and then they heard many footsteps coming towards here. Quick, let's hide, the professors are coming. He and Ron pulled Darren along, and they hid inside the cupboard in the faculty lounge. There's the Quidditch team's uniform in there. However, this cabinet has many gaps and can see the scene outside. Another attack, a student was captured by a monster and taken by it into the Chamber of Secrets of Slytherin. Professor McGonagall said with a pale face. Who? Snape's eyes widened in fear. His fingers gripped the chair tightly. Ginny Weasley. Snape's fingers loosened slightly. He didn't speak again. How did you hear the news? Professor Sprout covered her heart, and she almost shed tears. How did this school become so difficult and difficult? The heir to Slytherin left a written note, just behind the previous line, that read, "Her bones will remain in the Chamber of Secrets forever." Professor McGonagall said bitterly. Her mouth was open, as if she were taking a deep breath, but her eyes were still red. Tomorrow let all the children go back. That's it. I can't let any students have any more accidents. Professor McGonagall was about to say something, but her words were interrupted. It's Lockhart. Lockhart was shaking. He had a smile on his face, his hair neatly combed, and even the smell of shampoo on it. Perhaps, he had just washed his hair before he came. Maybe even a hairstyle. He was wearing a pale yellow robe that shone brightly as he walked. It looks like a lot of, "Oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. After all, my little cute book lovers are still waiting for my reply." He spoke cheerfully, without noticing the slightest attention that he had made his stupid mantra too successful, and now everyone looked at him with hateful eyes. The problem solver, isn't this coming? Minerva, I suggest just let Lockhart go. After all, he's seen many of these scenes. Snape burst out laughing, and he pushed Lockhart into the middle of the professor. Yeah, didn't you tell me yesterday that you know where the Chamber of Secrets is? Professor Sprout said indignantly. Lockhart's face was extremely pale, and he said in a panic, I did not. I can't. Why don't you let me go first? Episode 282, threatened Darren, what to go? Didn't you say the other day that you know exactly what the monster inside the Chamber of Secrets is? Professor Flitwick pulled Lockhart, because Lockhart was already trying to escape. I really can't. Let me go, right? Lockhart said weakly. He was just trying to disgust everyone, not really planning to die. Let you go? Lockhart, I tell you, if you dare to run, tomorrow the news that Lockhart is a hypocritical liar will spread throughout the wizarding world. Snape said menacingly. Yeah, you didn't say that this thing should have been let go of you from the beginning. Tomorrow, you go to the Chamber of Secrets, or the news that you are a liar will spread throughout the wizarding world. Professor McGonagall followed. Let it go. Yes, good news awaits you. Don't let us down. Professor Xiong said with a lot of tongues. Lockhart's face was extremely pale. He said with trepidation, I, too, need to prepare. Rest assured, I'll go. I'll do it tomorrow. While the professors were relaxing, he finally ran out with a cigarette. The other professors then returned to their previous expressions. Well, this idiot is finally gone, and we should hurry up and inform the students. She sucked in her nose, and then she strode away from the faculty lounge. Darren and Harry, along with Ron, returned to their lounges. They were almost unprecedented in silence, because no one knows what the situation will be after that. Even Jinny is probably dead. Darren sat in the Slytherin lounge with red eyes. It was Snape who brought him back directly. He had planned to pretend to be a holy father and go to the Chamber of Secrets. But Snape, after he and Harry got them out of the staff lounge, dragged him straight to the Slytherin lounge. I want you to recognize your own strength, the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, which even the professors may not be able to solve. A student who is still in school recklessly wants to go to the secret room. Is he trying to add chaos to the professors? Snape was in the middle of the lounge, speaking sarcastically. All of Slytherin's students had their eyes set on Darren. Apparently, everyone knows that Snape is talking about Darren. Darren pursed his lips, and his eyes were red, and he said, Professor, will you let me go? I wasn't optimistic about Jinny. I should have listened to her. As a result, I persuaded her to go to the school doctor's office. And it must have been at that time, she was taken away by the monster, all because of me. He pressed against the pane, his face pale and weak, looking pitiful. It's just that Snape didn't have the slightest softness. What did he let this guy out to do? Going out to die? Tomorrow, after sending you away, the professors will join forces with the Ministry of Magic to search the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets inside the castle. Tonight, I will be in the Slytherin lounge, and I hope not to be caught by anyone. Snape looked indifferently at Darren. Darren sighed. Couldn't he brush the Divine Father's value this time? Have to let Harry go on his own? He was very lost. Frustrated, he returned to the Slytherin lounge, thinking that tomorrow they might face Harry with the rumors that they had saved the world. However, when I got up the next morning, there was nothing. Harry and Ron were also looking downcast. Darren was shocked. They didn't even sneak out at night? Professor McGonagall was in the Gryffindor lounge, and the cloak of invisibility couldn't hide her eyes. Well, professors have indeed gotten smarter. But, does this school just leave it alone? All students, get in the car as soon as possible, Professor McGonagall said solemnly. Darren sighed and was preparing to leave with the current. However, a magic wand was placed behind him. Don't move, Potter, Darren Porter. After you get in the car in a minute, figure out how to get out, and then come over and wait for me here. If you don't come, the last time you used the fire curse, I will pass it out. It's Lockhart. What does this product mean? Didn't he say all of his fire spells? Was it a modified version? What an improved version. I have never heard of this statement at all. It must be the professors who comfort you, that is, the full version of the fire curse. If it is passed out, the brother of the famous Harry Potter actually uses a vicious spell, and you think about how many people will mock Harry Potter, and the mysterious people will laugh. Lockhart sneered at the threat. What do you want to do? If it was for me to do something bad, I would rather kill myself than go with you. Darren gritted his teeth and said. His face was pale, but he looked determined. Lockhart was slightly moved, but remembering the persecution of Snape's people, he still said angrily, they asked me to find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. I don't dare. I think you have the strength. So, you come over in a moment, and then you find the Chamber of Secrets and rescue the girl, or rescue the girl's bones. I will make a bold and loyal curse with you, and I will never tell this matter out. Lockhart gritted his teeth. He felt those people were assholes. He was forced to find the Chamber of Secrets, or else he would have been said to be a straw bag. He should have packed his bags and left after Dumbledore had been driven away. Instead of being intimidated by the letters left by Dumbledore, he really continued to be a professor here. Damn it. Lockhart had wanted to sneak away today, and who knew that these professors had blocked the door, and that no one could get out of here except the students. Especially him. He overhears their conversation, and they intend to expose him as long as he doesn't find the Chamber of Secrets. So, he had only one way to threaten Darren, because Darren is a good bully. Also because he had the handle of Darren's powerful fire spell. He hadn't heard of anything that could unleash a powerful fire spell with any kind of love and protection. And it was all those professors who were biased in favor of Darren Porter. That is, Potter these children will believe. He let Potter get on the train and leave, naturally, just in case. If Potter had died, there would certainly be no one on him. Of course, even if Potter finally came out alive, he would definitely give Potter a blank slate. All the credit is his loss. Episode 283. What are you pretending? Boy, when Darren learned of Lockhart's idea, he called out to the good guys. This guy is so faceless. That's a good idea. But, he knew how could there be no chance of entering the Chamber of Secrets? However, although he was happy in his heart, Darren still showed the paleness of being intimidated. He nodded weakly. The face was extremely pale. When passing Snape, he also had red eyes. You. Snape tried to say something, but eventually he got up and stopped his voice. What can he say? Make this kid happy? But he knew it was impossible. This child will only put everything on himself. If he wanted to comfort the child, he might as well find out as soon as possible where the Chamber of Secrets was. By the way, and Dumbledore, is he crazy? Snape believed that Dumbledore must be in some corner of the school now. The girl was dragged into the Chamber of Secrets. Why didn't Dumbledore stop her? Does he really not know? Or did he have any ideas? Want to exercise the idea of a savior? To disrupt Dumbledore's plans, Snape and Professor McGonagall proposed yesterday to guard the lounge and not let the cubs come out at will. Indeed, neither cub went out. So, what else did Dumbledore have planned? Snape thought triumphantly. Then he left from the train. Now that he had put Darren on the train, it was time for him to leave. But he waited until the train had fully started before turning away. Darren sat in the carriage with a nervous expression. He had been worried that Harry would come looking for him, but he sneaked a peek and Harry and Ron were gone. Apparently, in addition to his desire to solve the matter of the Chamber of Secrets, Harry and Ron had the same idea. It's just that they don't want to bother him, so they will quietly leave. Darren sighed. Unfortunately, he also had to go back to school, because he was threatened. Hopefully Harry and Ron will see him not worry too much. Darren, are you there? There was a knock at the door of the carriage, and it was Becky's voice. Apparently the last time to test whether Darren was running around. Sister, I want to go back to school, he said in a sad voice. Betsy didn't make a sound anymore. Then he heard the sound of the door lock being reinforced. Forehead, can the door lock him? Darren skimmed his lips. Upon hearing Betsy leave, he immediately turns into a ghost state, puts on his invisibility cloak, and floats out of the window. By the time he reached Lockhart's designated location, Lockhart was already waiting there. Very well, you came just in time, there is no breaking of your word, then let's go. Lockhart smiled. He pointed his wand at Darren. You can now start looking for the Chamber of Secrets, he said triumphantly. Darren sighed, then led Lockhart to the basement bathroom. I have ever wondered if a girl died at Hogwarts 50 years ago, could her soul have remained here? Darren said softly. Lockhart's eyes lit up. Myrtle? Darren, you're so smart. As long as I tell them this conclusion, they should just not dare. Lockhart shut up as he spoke. He remembered that Darren sometimes didn't seem so simple, because Darren had also wronged him, saying that he threatened Harry Potter. Professor Lockhart, if you really are an academic fraud, you should say it. I think your writing is still very good, you can be a writer. Good guys, how come so many people are suddenly there? Shut up, I tell you, what do you know? You don't know anything, I'm from Ravenclaw, and I'm supposed to be the smartest student. However, my magic power is getting less and less, and a lot of magic cannot be used, because of the lack of magic. Only the magic of forgetting is tailor-made for me, and I can only enjoy the feeling of invincibility by using the magic of forgetting everything. Lockhart shouted angrily. He was jealous of Darren's particularly powerful student. Why is he so weak? Darren ignored his venting. He just turned his head in shock and looked at Lockhart. You forget everything. Won't your experiences all be someone else's? And then you stole their experience? And guess what? Lockhart did not answer directly, but looked at him slyly. Darren's face turned even paler. He obviously hated being with someone like that. But Lockhart didn't care what he thought. He said in a commanding tone, hurry up. If you don't want me to say that, you hurry. As soon as I found the girl, I could write a book, My Days of Adventure at Hogwarts. Boy, Darren called out to the good guys. If this cargo knew that there were so many people behind him, he didn't know if he could still say such things. Still, he showed a pale face. He prayed bitterly, please, as long as I find that Chamber of Secrets and rescue Jinny, you must make an unbreakable vow with me. I can't let anyone know that I can cast a fire spell, and I'll get my brother in trouble. As long as you can find it, I naturally mean it, Lockhart said triumphantly. Although he thought that as soon as Darren found the Chamber of Secrets and rescued the girl, he would give Darren a blank slate. Isn't what he wants to say next just what he wants to say? He was rampant. Hurry up, hurry up. He pointed his wand at Darren. Darren skimmed his lips. For a moment, he definitely made this guy pay a price. The ending in the original book is too cheap for him. It was too much to bully him as a little holy father. But, Darren still pale and came to the girl's bathroom. There's only Myrtle here. As soon as she saw Darren, she immediately shouted excitedly, Darren, you haven't left yet? I'm sorry, Myrtle, I have something to ask you. Where were you when you died before? She pointed to the sink next to her. Sink? What do you pack? You tell me, how did you die? I order you to speak in the name of a professor. Episode 284. He's a piece of waste. Professor. Even when threatened, Darren looked at Lockhart disapprovingly. He seemed stunned, not expecting Lockhart to use such an attitude towards a girl. Professor, I hope you can apologize to Myrtle. Darren was pale, but his gaze was still determined. He can accept Lockhart's threats, but he won't accept Lockhart's insults to Myrtle. Even if you are a professor, you should not treat Myrtle like this. She is already a ghost, not your student. Please apologize to her. Darren accepted the father's value, and the expression on his face became more righteous. Lockhart looked at his expression and sneered. Why can't he order this ghost to tell the truth? And this ghost is not telling the truth at all. What's in that sink? Is there a secret room under that washstand? How could he possibly die there? Darren Porter, I warn you. Don't pretend to be any good guy here. You're not a good person. What do you think you're doing? I don't know. The last time you told someone that I threatened you, others didn't know. How could I not know? You are not a good person yourself, and you are still pretending to be kind here? There is only one idiot ghost here, and you and I know what we know, so don't pretend. Lockhart said sarcastically. Others say Darren is silly and sweet. He might have been half convinced before, but since Darren had wronged him, he didn't believe it anymore. This guy is definitely pretending. Others were blinded by his performance. He was dismissive. Darren glanced at him. Some sighs. This guy had seduction in his eyes. Obviously doing something like camera recordings. If there was no one else here, he would admit it. He wasn't afraid of this kind of stuff at all. He played Lockhart 6, but there are still many people here. How could he possibly reveal his true colors? So, as a little holy father, he frowned, as if thinking about the events of that day, and then he said with some disappointment, I thought you apologized to me because you knew you were wrong. But I didn't expect you to look at me like this, naive. Darren seemed to want to explain. Just looking at Lockhart's expression, he still sighed and skipped the topic. Forget it, if I wronged you, can you apologize now? Myrtle is not your student. When you ask her questions, please say please. This is a respect for her. Darren's words did not move Lockhart in the slightest. He was just excited about a question. Do you think I'm not prepared? Look, this is a photo ball, and I've already recorded what you just said. I will let everyone know that Harry Potter's brother Darren Porter did such a thing, that he had wronged a professor. Write in. Right after we go out, I'll make him public, how's that? Lockhart holds up a photo ball. There is also a portrait of Darren on the photo ball. It was the image of him confessing that he had wronged Lockhart. Darren showed a bitter expression. He seemed to want to say something, but finally he could only sigh and say, "What the hell do you want to do? I don't care about this kind of shadow ball. As long as you promise me not to pass on the things I used the fire spell, I will tell others personally. I have wronged you. I can even kneel down and apologize to you at the Ministry of Magic. You can do whatever you want. I just ask you not to let your brother's reputation be tarnished." His voice was bitter. Apparently the strength to argue has been lost. His expression made people feel sad when they looked at him, but Lockhart was still not moved. He looked at Darren triumphantly, carefully put away the shadow ball, and then pointed at Myrtle and said to Darren, "Go, ask clearly, how did this woman die? Where exactly is the Chamber of Secrets? Or was it her who opened the Chamber of Secrets?" Darren's gaze followed him to Myrtle. Myrtle was looking at Darren worriedly. "Darren, are you threatened?" Although she was timid, she couldn't really turn a blind eye to the look of Darren, who was even more pitiful than she was. "Yes, I'm sorry, Sister Myrtle. I apologize to you on behalf of Professor Lockhart. I'm sorry," Darren said sadly. Apparently, he felt that he had brought Lockhart here to make Myrtle so impolite. "Oh, I don't care about his attitude. A lot of people in this school are like him to me. And there are not many polite people like you. I'm just worried. Are you threatened by him? If you are threatened, tell me, and I will inform the professor in a moment," she asked worriedly. In this school, she can only talk to Darren like this, because she felt that Darren was more innocent than she was. He could easily be taken away by the bad guys. He will also do things that hurt himself, because of the life and death of those bad people. Now Lockhart was the bad guy in her eyes. She had completely forgotten that Lockhart was a professor, and she had thought Lockhart was handsome before. It's just that her kindness, neither Lockhart nor Darren cares. Lockhart smiled triumphantly as he said in Darren's ear, "Fire curse, remember." Darren secretly rolled his eyes. His face turned pale, and then he shook his head slightly. "It's all right, I'm not threatened. Professor Lockhart is still." "Very well, I made Professor Lockhart angry. I came this time to ask a question. Sister, when you first died, did you see the snake coming out of nowhere? If this question makes you uncomfortable, you cannot answer. I will look for clues." "Oh, kind little Darren, if anyone else had asked, I certainly wouldn't have told him. The Ministry of Magic also came to ask, but I didn't want to say it, because I was all dead, and it was useless to find the guy. In fact, the guy came out from under the sink when I had a fight with all of them. She laughed at me for wearing glasses like a four-eyed dog, and I was crying here. Then I heard a boy's voice. He spoke in a very strange voice, and I turned my head to see a snake coming out of the sink, and I saw its eyes die. So, I think the Chamber of Secrets should be under this sink. If you have to go down, you'd better take the professor. Oh, Lockhart, or forget it, he's a waste." Episode 285. Maybe gone. Myrtle looked at Lockhart with disdain. Her eyes were full of contempt. After all, she also went to the duel club that day. She had never seen such a weak professor. "Thank you." Darren looked at Myrtle movingly. Myrtle cried out in excitement. Then she plunged headlong into the flush toilet. Darren smiled deftly. Then he turned to look at Lockhart, as if trying to say something, but Lockhart didn't want to hear it at all. He said angrily, "Damn Myrtle, she dares to despise me. Potter, you find the Chamber of Secrets now, and I must let them know how great I am." As long as I found the Chamber of Secrets, I no longer doubted my achievements. Darren rolled his eyes. Funny, just his crap look. As long as he and Lockhart made a stop there, it was almost obvious who had found the Chamber of Secrets, but he still hasn't had a seizure. Instead, he said with some concern, "Professor, I think we might as well go to other professors, right? I already seem to know what the Chamber of Secrets is all about, and you can see the serpentine sign on this sink. It should be necessary to use the snake cavity to read out and open. You can open the chamber. So we still go report to the professor that my life is nothing to your." Darren's words made Lockhart excited. He seemed to be unable to distinguish between the southeast, the south, the north, and the west. He even said unashamedly, "Of course, my life is more important than yours, but you are in front of me, aren't you?" He was extremely cunning. Put the malice is particularly obvious. "Boy," Darren called out to the good guys. "This guy really doesn't have a face." He also wanted him to stand in the way of this guy. Want a face? Darren was speechless, but he immediately nodded solemnly. It didn't seem to sense Lockhart's malice at all. He thought seriously and said, "Professor, if you have to think like this, then you will try to listen to me. If I stand in your way, you must close your eyes. You also heard Sister Myrtle say, as long as you see those eyes may die. I am fine, I can do it for you." Darren struggles to tell Lockhart about the precautions, but Lockhart didn't want to hear him say it at all. He urged impatiently, "Okay, well, I already know. Now you hurry to open the Chamber of Secrets. By the way, I'm going to scare the memory of the process. And when it's time to show the professor's," Lockhart pointing to the sink and forcing Darren to open it quickly. Darren looked at him with some concern, but he obediently walked to the sink. After looking at it for a while, he said, "Open." Several terrifying voices spat out of his mouth. Lockhart took a few steps back in fright. Then the faucet started spinning. The sink is gone. Finally, a huge passage appeared here. It's a huge tube that allows people to go straight in. Darren looked back at Lockhart. Lockhart triumphantly held up the photo ball. He held up a photographic ball and took a picture near the tube. And he also took care of himself. He said to the shadow ball, "Ah, dear friends, see what I found? This is the Chamber of Secrets, and I have worked hard and found a student." After letting him communicate with Myrtle, he knew that this was the place. Lockhart was still there. Darren mouthed us. He wondered how he could push this guy down and make it look like this guy wanted to push him down and then eat the consequences. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host. Now release a temporary task. Walk up to Lockhart, expose your back to Lockhart, and make an observation of the Chamber of Secrets pipe. After 30 seconds, make a look of what you came up with, move to the left, and say, "Professor, look here, I found." What about the professor? Ding, after the mission is completed, get Sirius favorability plus 20. Will the host receive the task? Hey, Sirius's favorability? Shouldn't his relationship with Sirius be bad? How come Sirius even has a favorability? So the scene he sees in the future is true or false? After all, according to the system's current reward, he should not let Sirius die. Could it be that he and Sirius did the play? Or what Sirius thought? Darren thought about it. Half a day did not come up with a result, or decide to take the task first. He watched as Lockhart was still there holding the shadow ball, conspicuously at the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. A helpless expression appeared on his face. Then he walked warily to the front of the pipe. It seems to be studying whether the pipeline can be used. His back was completely exposed to Lockhart. Lockhart's ostentatious expression suddenly froze, and then a sly smile appeared on his face. So, he put down the shadow ball, took a step forward, and pushed Darren hard with both hands. "Be careful." As Darren stepped back like the left, he seemed to hear Harry's voice. But as if he hadn't heard anything, he pointed solemnly to the end of the passage and said, "Professor, look here." He stopped there, because he didn't see Lockhart at all. Only the shadow ball landed on the ground. Well, what about the professor? Ding. Congratulations to the host for completing the mission. Get the reward. Sirius favorability level plus 20. Currently Sirius favorability level is 20. Boy, reward 20 favorability. Really only 20 favorability. Friends are also good brothers. Well, not good brothers. It is estimated that in Sirius's eyes, he should be regarded as the Dark Lord's child. It's good to be able to be good all the time. If it were James, he might have a negative 100 liking rating for him. Darren sighed. He seemed to be greatly disappointed by the professor's resignation. And just when Darren was about to say a few more words, brush the father's value, I heard Lockhart's voice underneath, as if it were coming from the deepest part of the pipe. "Potter, how dare you push me? Are you crazy? Aren't you afraid I'll tell anyone about that? I tell you, today I am dead and will not let you go." "Ah wow, even still threatening him to lead? Professor, you're probably gone today." "No, even if you live, it is better to live than to die. How can you still have such a big spirit and threaten him with such a poor good boy?" Episode 286. Good words hard to persuade damn ghosts. Of course, as a little holy father, Darren certainly couldn't think of it that way. He seemed to be very surprised. "Teaching, Professor, how did you fall?" "I'll go down and save you now." Darren looked panicked. He immediately jumped without thinking, but the next second, he used the ghost state and flew down gently. He remembered that there seemed to be a lot of mud in the passage. This should have been Slytherin specifically for the Basilisk to get through. People walk somewhere in the Gryffindor lounge. However, at present, it has been systematically transformed into a space-time corridor. Darren sighed. He just wanted to find a clean place and didn't have it, only to go down from this pipe. Fortunately, he has a ghost state. By the time he landed, he and Lockhart stood in stark contrast. Lockhart sat dirty on the ground. The top of his blonde hair was about to be contaminated with mud. When you get closer, you can smell a stench. Professor, how are you?" Darren hurried over to Lockhart. He didn't seem to notice Lockhart's embarrassment at all, but directly wanted to help Lockhart. But Lockhart was weak-hearted. He also thought Darren was trying to get revenge on him. He was so frightened that he rolled over and sat up. Darren then saw that a particularly large bag had been slammed into his head. It looked so interesting. "Professor, are you all right?" Even when Lockhart treated him like this, Darren showed a worried look. Lockhart was only half convinced that Darren had no bad intentions. "What about my photo ball?" Lockhart asked suddenly and vigilantly. Darren shook his head, as if he hadn't imagined that Lockhart would ask the question when he saw him. "You fool, you should take the shadow ball, otherwise how will you show those people my heroic appearance in the Chamber of Secrets?" Darren raised an eyebrow. This cargo energy is quite big. They were all thrown like this, and they still had the strength to scold him. Sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary mission, coax Lockhart to go forward, and at the first moment of seeing the Basilisk, block Lockhart's side, and then say, "Close your eyes." And after Lockhart sees the Basilisk's eyes, he uses psychic healing to heal Lockhart, and the extent to which it will be healed is up to the host to decide. After the mission is completed, get the reward can shrink the Basilisk. Will the host receive the task? Still want to heal Lockhart? Darren skimmed his lips. Why not let him just die? But he had a good idea right away. He took on the task. Darren looked at Lockhart. A trace of sympathy flashed in his eyes. He was ready to heal Lockhart to the point of some consciousness, but not at all. "In the future, I will go to see Lockhart once a year, and I think it should make Lockhart fans move to tears. At this thought, the expression on his face was more sincere. Professor, why don't we wait here for rescue? I'm worried that there's that snake in front of me, and with your... No, I'm not saying you can't. I was just... Sorry, you don't take it to heart. I mean, we should be here waiting for the professors to come to our rescue, and the professor should notice that we are missing. Darren, who accepted the father's value, had a particularly sincere expression on his face. It's just that he can't be trusted in Lockhart's eyes, especially the words he said. It's all words for the other professors to save them. This made Lockhart even angrier. If he was really willing to let the other professors come to his rescue, how could he possibly come up with a way to force Darren to go with him? How could his purpose in threatening Darren be to wait for help here? He was there to be a hero at Hogwarts. How powerful Darren is. He was able to catch so many Death Eaters, and Lockhart felt that Darren's magic was certainly no lower than those of the professors, so what was he afraid of? Although Darren had deliberately framed him before, but he still felt in his heart that when there was danger, Darren would be the first to stand in front of him. Even if he were pretending, he would do it. So Lockhart, I felt like I was coming again. He snorted. Looking at Darren with disdain, he said, Coward, what dare not go? You are now walking in front of you immediately. If there is danger, you will stand in front of me. Did you hear me? He said without shame. Darren showed a hesitant expression. It's dangerous ahead. He tried to persuade Lockhart again, but Lockhart interrupted him. I don't think you want you to use the fire spell to spread throughout the magic world, right? He laughed wickedly. It seems that such a condition can threaten Darren. Darren skimmed his lips, and then he seemed to want to persuade again, but Lockhart had pushed him. He walked ahead with a wry smile. Still, he turned his head to look at Lockhart. Professor, whatever I say, you must listen. I say close your eyes. You must close your eyes, just in case. Well, I've ventured so many times, how could I not know? You hurry up, don't ink. Lockhart interrupted Darren. Darren showed a helpless expression. Then he became cautious. He pulled out his wand and cautiously walked ahead, tearing. Killed. Just as he was pondering where the basilisk was hiding, he suddenly heard the basilisk's signature voice. Close your eyes. Darren immediately blocked Lockhart's body in horror. Then he saw the basilisk moving away from his feet at a rapid pace. It seemed to notice that there was someone around Darren and didn't call out anything. Darren found that this guy was definitely not stupid in his brain. Clever. After seeing the basilisk leave, Darren seemed to be relieved and said, Professor, well, it's gone, but we'll go back. I may be able to kill it, but it's hard. I'll take you. Darren didn't look back. He also looked in the direction the basilisk had left, his expression worried. It was only when he said this that Darren suddenly seemed to realize something, and he suddenly turned back to look at Lockhart. Lockhart had slipped to the ground. Episode 287. Darren, this old six. Professor. I can definitely save you. Darren's eyes instantly turned red. With pale cheeks, he pounced on Lockhart's side. Then he shook his forehead and put his hand on the top of Lockhart's head, because it's a little cleaner right here. Then he closed his eyes. Lockhart, who had almost stopped breathing, suddenly began to breathe. He opened one eye. Professor, don't move. I don't have the strength. Darren stopped with some trepidation. Still, Lockhart moved. He broke away from Darren's hand. Ding, mission completed. Get rewards. Able to shrink the basilisk. Basilisk that can shrink. When around the host, the basilisk can shrink, and the state of the shrinkage is determined by the host. This. Darren suddenly felt that his mind was a little unhealthy. However, he reacted immediately. There are so many people watching here. After the palm of his hand left Lockhart's head, he seemed to fall to the ground somewhat dizzily, but he immediately climbed to Lockhart's side again. Obviously, he himself was too tired to stand up, but he still wanted to do something. Professor. How about you? He said intermittently. The tone is weak and weak. It seems that the next second will faint. Lockhart blinked hard. He wanted to say he was very bad. He seemed to have only one eye to move, but he couldn't say it. Only with that one eye, he looked at Darren angrily. Darren seemed to understand. He put his hand on Lockhart's head again. System, let him keep it like this in the future. Merlin is not good when he comes. How much is the Holy Father value? Ding, 2,000 father values are required. Is it deducted? Ah hey, buckle. Darren grinned secretly. It's just that he bowed his head and hidden. He still made the appearance that he wanted to save Lockhart again. It's just that this time he can't do any harder, and he doesn't seem to be able to make Lockhart any better. Professor, I can't seem to use that ability, Darren said in a panic. He seemed to squeeze all his abilities, but it didn't work at all. Professor, you wait. I'll go find someone to save you. Darren tried to get up and go outside, but he couldn't seem to stand up at all. As soon as he tried to stand up, he slammed into Lockhart's face. Professor. I can't stand up. I can't save you, Professor. You try to see if you can stand up. Professor. Darren's eyes grew redder. He slumped down next to Lockhart, red-eyed trying to get Lockhart to get himself up. Lockhart was able to move one eye and look at him filled with anger. Seems to think he meant it. Darren gave Lockhart a wicked smile up close. But when I looked up, my pretty green eyes were already filled with mist. Professor. It's my fault. If only I had reminded you to be louder if my hand hadn't left your head just now, Darren said weakly. He seemed to be crying out in the next second. In stark contrast to him was Lockhart's eyes. He looked at Darren almost with a look of hatred. The expression on Darren's face just now had proved that Darren had meant it. If he can still move and speak, He must take up his wand and kill Darren, the old sixth. Darren looked into his eyes, his face paler. He wanted to say something, but he tried a few times, but he still didn't stand up, and could only turn his head with red eyes. Professor, it should be right away. I should be right away. I should just be out of power. Maybe I can try again and see if I can heal you. Darren tried to speak in a happy voice. It's just that his eyes are miserable. Obviously, he couldn't quite believe that he could really save Lockhart. It could be a minute, it could be 10 minutes. With Darren's disdainful efforts, he finally stood up when Lockhart's face was swollen. He waved his wand, as if to get Lockhart out. Just before he could take Lockhart with him, Harry and Ron finally walked in from outside. They seemed to have just seen Darren with a look of surprise on their faces. Darren, you are? Harry asked with some false affection. He had actually been following Darren with Ron just now. They saw Lockhart threaten Darren. I also saw the scene where Lockhart was almost killed. He even saw Lockhart look at Darren with a resentful look after he was rescued by Darren. Just as Darren had just fallen to the ground, Harry had planned to uncover the cloak of invisibility to help Darren. But Ron doubted that if they showed up now, Darren's kindness would surely lead them to hurry up and send Lockhart to St. Mungo. How could they possibly want this to happen and let Lockhart wake up and give Darren a rake? He felt that Lockhart wasn't dead anyway, and it would be nice if he kept it that way in the future. So he and Ron decided to wait a little while and come back, because Ron said that even St. Mungo's, if he went late, he might delay treatment. In order to delay Lockhart's treatment, they walked around the neighborhood for several more minutes. When he found out that Darren could stand up, he immediately took off his invisibility cloak to show his face after all, and Darren himself left with Lockhart. Darren, how are you? Harry looked at Darren worriedly. Although he had seen it before, Darren was fine this time. Indeed, as Darren said, it was a loss of strength, but he was still worried. After all, he had just heard it, and Darren said that he could not use any of his abilities. Brother. As soon as Darren saw Harry, his eyes turned red again. Harry choked up almost instantly. Darren hadn't had a few days of comfort since he came to Hogwarts. Every day he was terrified. Every day he thought about not letting anyone else do anything. Obviously, he was the older brother, but almost all the painful things were suffered by Darren. It's all right. Lockhart is definitely fine. We'll be right away. Harry was about to say that we were going to deliver it at once, when suddenly we heard a loud noise at the end of the Chamber of Secrets. Brother, you go fast, go fast. You take Professor Lockhart with you, hurry. Darren almost instantaneously whitened his cheeks, threw Lockhart at Harry, and rushed toward the end of the Chamber of Secrets. Brother, it's a basilisk, you run, I'll stop it. Episode 288. And Basilisk fake fight. You come back, Harry shouted subconsciously, but thinking about Lockhart's fate, he and Ron dragged Lockhart outside. It's not that they don't want to stay, it's that they know that if they stay, they're dragging their feet. Darren himself may be fine, but with them, not necessarily. They are now out to find the professor to help Darren. It's just that. When Harry and Ron got to the pipe, they were dumbfounded, because the pipe was so long, it seemed to be hundreds of meters away from the ground, and with the two of them, it was impossible to go up. Harry, they dragged Lockhart, their faces full of despair. Especially when I heard the sound of rumbling and vibrating at the end of the aisle, I was even more frightened. Ron, you're waiting here. I'm going to help Darren, you know, I'm a snakehead, and I can certainly help him, Harry said tremblingly. Since he couldn't get out, it was better to help Darren. Even if he can stand in front of Darren, maybe he can still keep Darren alive. Don't be silly, I'm going too, because it's my sister there. But now there's a problem in front of us, and that's... Ron pointed to Lockhart. Harry seemed to remember that there was such a person. Lockhart's eyes were filled with horror, and he seemed to realize something. I'm sorry, we're going to go find Darren and take your inconvenience, so you might as well lie here. Maybe. If there is a professor, let the professor save you. Ron had a malicious smile on his pale face. He pulled out his wand. Harry, you can't stop me. Even this wand was bought for me by Darren, not to mention that he was saving Jinny, Ron said sadly. Only when he looked up did he realize that Harry had run away. Boom! A loud bang. The basilisk's tail knocked down a section of the Chamber of Secrets. Ron watched as Harry walked through the rubble, and then in front of him was a solid wall. Shit, Ron scolded angrily. He kicked Lockhart back. It's all you. If I had just thrown you down, maybe I could have passed. Lockhart's eyes were filled with anger, but there are also reassuring looks. At least he didn't have to worry about the snake coming again. He had just felt terrified. He really thought he was dead. He had all come to a strange place, and it was Darren Porter who had pulled him back. Now Lockhart is still full of expectations. Although he is not in good shape now, but he believed that as long as he lived, St. Mungo would be able to save his injuries. At that time, Potter didn't have any ideas, and he had to tell Potter about using the fire curse. Potter is still too stupid. He should not have saved him. He had no idea how powerful Street Mungo was. Lockhart wanted to laugh triumphantly. Although only one eye can move, he can also see his pride. Of course, the next second he was kicked again by Ron. Although this did not affect his mood. They passed the time here, waiting for others to discover them. Darren is also in a fake fight with the basilisk. They fought inseparably, but it's all actually fake. The action is extremely cool, but unfortunately it is all deceptive. Darren had a lot of fun. In order not to let Harry bother him, he also deliberately hinted that the basilisk had broken the top of the Chamber of Secrets. Wanted to keep Harry over there. Who knew that Harry had rushed over to the rock? Ron was trapped by them. It became a scene like the original book. Also, Dumbledore was behind him. How could Harry Potter be stopped outside and do nothing? He thought too much. Darren sighed. Then he looked at Harry, as if he hadn't thought at all that Harry would come in. Brother, you're going out. Yes, you can't get out, and I'm helping you out now, and Modern seems frightened. While dealing with the basilisk, he tried to rush out and help Harry open a passage. It's just that. The next second, he and Harry heard a triumphant voice at the same time. Come back. The voice stopped the basilisk. The basilisk sneaked a glimpse of Darren. Darren was able to see grievances in his brass-colored eyes. Alright, this snake has a high IQ. He also knew how to cooperate with him in the fight, and even when he hinted that the basilisk smashed the top of the Chamber of Secrets, this guy also cooperated with him. Halfway through, they didn't even say a word of snake language. That said, isn't the snake really a Slytherin pet? It was much cuter than his Phoenix Carol. Open. A voice interrupted Darren's thoughts again. He looked back. Tom Riddle was saying this to a stone door. Then the stone door rumbled open. Jinny. Darren almost subconsciously rushed over. Jinny, how are you? Darren put his hand on Jinny's body. Apparently, he wanted to save Jinny. I just don't know why. His ability can no longer be used. He didn't get Jinny better for half a day. How can this be? Brother, I'm really the most useless. I hurt Professor Lockhart. I hurt Jinny. I can't even save them. Darren happily accepted the father's value. He intended to show in front of outsiders that he could no longer use the spiritual healing technique. Otherwise, the next time he meets someone, he will have to save, which is really troublesome. If Dumbledore didn't know he could heal his mind, he wouldn't have had to save Lockhart. He was annoyed with the guy, although he found Lockhart like this more interesting. But next time he won't save everyone, right? It is better to show it in front of everyone. He will not be. As for why the mind healing technique suddenly disappeared again, he thought that everything in the magic world was there. Not to disappear an ability, how normal it was. No matter how magic they have to believe. Who made him such a little holy father, could not lie. Of course, despite thinking so, Darren's face was still pale, and his green eyes were full of mist. Finally, he bowed his head. Tears suddenly fell from his eyes. Yes, sorry brother for scaring you. I'm fine now. I am fine. I'm just too tired. Episode 289. Your heart is dirty. Too tired. Just a soft word. Harry couldn't help but shed tears as he followed. His brother said he was too tired. Oh, yes. Everything in the wizarding world, Darren almost encountered. How could he not be tired? He wanted to save everyone, even if his body was injured, but now that he couldn't do it, how could he not be in pain? It's alright. Let's go back and let Dumbledore see it. You know he's the best, and he'll be able to give you the ability to save others from scratch. Harry was seriously comforted. Although he remembered Darren's pale weakness after saving people, he thought that his ability was better than nothing, but he still forced a smile to comfort Darren. His brother just wanted to save people. If he can't save people, he must be very sad, right? Snap. A clapping sound came. It's really touching brotherhood. It really touched me so much. You see, I'm in tears. Tom Riddle appeared beside them. He had Jinny's wand in his hand. Harry seemed to have just seen him. His face turned surprised. I know you, Tom Riddle, and you're here too. Quick, you hold Jinny, and I'll take Darren with me. We took them out and Darren is not in a good situation right now, he said anxiously, and wanted to help Darren. It's just that Darren shook his head slightly. He gently lowered Jinny. Then he stood up slowly on his own. He looked at Tom Riddle. Tom Riddle, you opened the Chamber of Secrets, and you brought Jinny here? Darren, Tom Riddle is the one who took me to see the scene where Hagrid was captured, shouldn't he? Harry whispered in Darren's ear. He felt how Tom Riddle in front of him looked like a good boy with good character and good learning. How could it be the heir to Slytherin? No, brother, you were deceived by him. That's what he did. It's my fault too. I heard you say that he was able to let you see the scene through a diary. I should understand that he is not a simple thing. He is not a ghost, not a living person, but he can be so real. Brother, I actually let you stay with that diary for so long. Fortunately you are fine, fortunately, Darren said happily. Tom Riddle smiled. He clapped his hands at Darren. Then a greedy dream flashed in his eyes. He wanted Darren's body. He had only noticed Darren Potter when he was with Harry Potter before. At the sight of Darrenport, Tom Riddle was moved. He wants to occupy this body. He wanted to replace Darren Porter. It's just that every time he tries to take action against Darren Porter, he feels terrified. It was as if he had already done it once and then been beaten up by Darren Porter. This made him unable to do anything several times. In the end, he could only stay by Harry Potter's side and try to attack Darren Potter again one day. But who knows, the red-haired girl actually stole him again, and also to tell Darren Porter of his existence. If the girl had really told Darren Potter of his existence, Dumbledore would have known about it too. His Horcrux would surely be easily killed by Dumbledore. To save his life, Tom Riddle had to bring the red-haired girl with him. He was ready to wait until the limelight. Anyway, with this girl's life, he should be much stronger. As long as Darren Porter is still in this school, he will definitely find opportunities. But what I didn't expect was that the professors actually let all the students go home. And even Harry Potter got on the train and left. When he heard the news, he was almost angry. Darren Potter is Slytherin, and it's normal that he doesn't necessarily come out to him. But what about Harry Potter? He was a reckless lion. How could he really not care about his friend's sister and really go home? Tom Riddle was bored, but he didn't feel this way for long. He suddenly found that Darren Porter had actually come in. As for Lockhart, who was following behind Darren, he was not at all taken into account by Tom Riddle. He was just gladly following Darren, thinking that he must occupy Darren's body today. Especially after hearing Darren's analysis, I was even happier. Sure enough, it is worthy of the person he likes. This brain reacts well, at least better than that stupid Harry Potter. His main soul was planted on such a stupid lion. What a waste. He looked at Darren and applauded again. It's you, Darren Porter. Aren't you wondering why that red-haired girl became like this? Darren frowned, and he pursed his lips and said, Jinny must have been stared at by you for a long time. She is so small, so simple. That's what you like about her, and then you're going to bring her here. Ha ha ha, you don't know yet. This girl knew about me from the beginning, and she regarded me as a close brother. Ask me why she blushes when she sees Harry, why her heart beats faster when she sees her, and sometimes she gets angry with Harry for you and she doesn't understand what's wrong with her. What do you say is wrong with her? By the way, I remember her words. She said I seem to like Darren. He's like a little angel. Tom Riddle smiled triumphantly, and he read out the words in his diary as if to humiliate Jinny. Darren looked at Jinny pityingly. He felt that if Jinny were really unconscious, she would be much more comfortable. Unfortunately, when he was holding Jinny just now, he felt as if she was not completely unconscious, and she should still be able to hear and feel. This girl is afraid that she is going to die. Of course, as a little holy father, he couldn't just laugh at girls. He interrupted Tom Riddle's recitation. Shut up. I said that Jinny was just a simple little girl who didn't understand what love was. She only adored me and Harry to behave like that. You should not insult a small child like this, although you have a handsome appearance. But I think you are dirty in your heart. Episode 290. Makes no sense. Tom Riddle's expression changed suddenly. He hates it most when people say he's dirty. It reminded him of the closet that Dumbledore had burned in front of him. That's good, but that's it. Tom Riddle suddenly came to Darren's side. He looked at Darren's face and said feverishly, what a perfect face, what a delicious soul. I feel that your soul is angry, and the angry soul is not good, and I will send you a fire. Why don't I just tell me what the girl did? Do you know? The girl, she had opened the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, and she had also strangled Hagrid's rooster. By the way, she commanded the Basilisk to petrify your friends, and she also commanded the Basilisk to almost kill you. Sad, yes, that's it. Keep the sad mood and let me swallow your soul in one gulp. Tom Riddle said triumphantly. He triumphantly seemed to be about to devour Darren's soul in the next second. In fact, he did the same. It's just that. 1 time, 2 times, and down. Tom Riddle was confused. He looked at Darren's soul strangely. Oh, yes. He looked at Darren indeed, very painfully, incredibly, sadly. How is it useless? Moreover, he felt that this feeling was so familiar, as if there was indeed a time when he didn't swallow this guy's soul. Wrong. How could he have ever been in contact with Darren Porter? It doesn't make sense. No, you can't think about these things now. Maybe I misremembered. In fact, emotions need to be desperate to swallow? He began to doubt himself. Maybe I really misremembered. No, he has to work harder. So he began to think about it again, ready to make Darren despair. Darren looked at his expression and almost smiled. This guy is so funny. The last time it was a soul attack on him. This time it may have been a psychological shadow, and it did not use a soul attack against him. Instead, he wanted to swallow his soul. Also keep sad. He kept it sad, and this guy didn't hurt him either. Standing still and letting him fight can't do it. However, as a little holy father, it was enough to be sad for a while, and he was about to find an excuse for Jinny, so he immediately returned to his previous mood. He said somewhat angrily, I just remembered that it wasn't right. Jinny definitely didn't do those things on purpose. She was so kind, so simple, she certainly couldn't do it. You must have manipulated her to do it, you this vicious guys. Darren gritted his teeth and scolded. However, he was angry again, and scolding it was just a vicious word. Harry sighed next to him. Darren also said that others are kind and simple, and he is actually much kinder than Jinny. What the hell do you want to do? Something is coming at me. My brother, he doesn't know anything. Harry stood angrily next to Darren. He is the older brother, and Darren is the younger brother. What to do? Harry Potter, I know you. Tom Riddle hadn't figured out a way to plunge Darren into despair. In his utter embarrassment, Harry appeared in front of him. Riddle suddenly came up with an idea. He looked at Harry. I learned from Jinny that your experience in the past 2 years. It is said that you once defeated the Dark Lord when you were a child, and last year. I'd love to see what the guy who can beat me twice looks like. Such a look disappointed me. Harry was stunned. He didn't quite understand what Tom Riddle meant. Then he was pulled behind him by Darren. Brother, it's Voldemort. He's a Voldemort. You go fast, fast. Darren clenched his wand. Beads of sweat appeared on his nervous forehead. Voldemort? How can it be? Harry looked at Tom Riddle in disbelief. How could it be? Tom Riddle and Voldemort have no similarities. Brother. Voldemort is his future, He is Voldemort's past. He is the Voldemort of childhood. Darren was extremely cautious. He wrote Tom Riddle's name in the air with his wand, and then waved it. These letters make up Voldemort. Snap. Tom Riddle was full of admiration. I can't bear it anymore. Such a clever you. I want to swallow my soul and become my body. He had a look of pity on his face, but was actually more expectant. Only in this way can he later behave more and better in front of others, and no one has doubted it yet. What are you talking about? Why did you swallow Darren's soul? This is sinful, Harry cried out angrily. He panicked and tried to keep Darren behind, but he couldn't move Darren's body at all. Even he could only be protected by Darren. Darren, you let go. I'm going to fight with him. Voldemort, if you dare to move Darren, I will not let you go. Childish little lion, if I were you, I would look at my brother's expression, and even Darren Porter knew that my goal was you. As long as you die and I swallow Darren Porter's soul, who knows I'm Voldemort? I will have a greater career, and I will stand on the top of the world from scratch. Dumbledore wanted to stop me again, his crazy old fool. Tom Riddle laughed wildly. Just the next second he stopped, the smile stopped. Because Darren angrily pulled out his wand, he roared, you don't want to kill my brother, and you are not allowed to insult Dumbledore, you bastard who killed my parents. The fire surrounded Tom Riddle in the next second. He screamed in horror and roared. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something. He looked at Darren in horror. Yes, Darren snickered. Sure enough, he knew that forging the card would be less effective for Voldemort and Dumbledore. Their intuition seems to sense that something is wrong, and when he encounters similar scenes, he can still recall something. But he certainly wouldn't let Tom Riddle finish the rest. The fire pierced Tom Riddle's diary. Tom Riddle screamed and disappeared. Darren looked at the basilisk. It also seemed to be afraid of the fire. But after Darren made a look, he still tried to jump in. It was like dying with Tom Riddle's diary. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host. Now release a temporary task. Turn around and say to Harry, brother, I don't deserve to be your brother. I already know from the professor, the fire spell is a curse. And go directly into the fire. Use the Holy Father's value to fake the burn picture, and to see the tears of the phoenix. Ding, after the mission is completed, the blood concentration of the obtained Carlo is increased by 100%. Will the host pick it up?